welcome to the channel. We are a few days after the new update. The main idea was to balance classes. A new gem and several quality of life improvements have been added as well. But is the path chosen by the developers correct? Let's just analyze it. I think that the new 2-star gem is very interesting for many players. So as description at rank 10 says, dealing damage increases your attack speed by 2.4% for 3 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. While at full stacks, your movement speed is increased by 12%. And while staking attack speed seems to be quite beneficial, the bonus to movement speed is very optional. It would be a very interesting alternative to BSJ, but in this form, unfortunately, I think it is not a very good solution, both for PvE and PvP. And even if it seems that it will significantly increase the dynamics of your character, remember that it requires constant maintenance, what most likely won't be easy. And on top of that, you need 11 battle pass to collect 41 copies of this gem if you don't buy anything except the battle pass. So it will take roughly 1 year to obtain rank 10. And at this stage of the game, I would expect high rank gems on my character. So it is a bit downside for me, but if you are fine with it, then definitely you can go for it. However, keep in mind that during this time we can receive other and maybe better alternatives. So eventually for me, pearls are much better choice. They have also refined certain aspects of familiars to ease the gameplay experience, such as adjusted movement speed of familiars to improve their ability to collect loot faster. But I believe they should just increase pickup radius. The description for certain familiar passive skills has been altered to increase their clarity, and missed familiar contracts will now be sent to players via in-game mail, which is fine, but still contract drop chance seems to be lower. And options to prevent converting the wrong pet by adding the pet lock option. Additionally, you can now link the pet just in case of sharing its info with other people. I'm going to make quite a big video about pets soon. However, this will require quite a lot of work to show everything I have learned, but I think that I've figured out the system quite well, so it's worth to be patient. But let's get to the most important part of this update: skills and items Rebalanced.
In Battleground and Rite of Exile, damage dealt to summons by players has been decreased from 150% to 100%. This means players no longer deal increased damage to summons.
And here the developers are still trying to force us to use summons in PvP, but more about this with the Necromancer.
In Battlegrounds and Rite of Exile, subsequent loss of control effects imposed by the same player within 6 seconds will have diminishing returns. Each subsequent effect will have 70% effectiveness compared to the last.
And that seemed like a big change to me. But in the end, 6 seconds is a long time, and the difference is not particularly noticeable to me. However, the nerfing of my favorite mechanic in PvP is incomprehensible for me. On the one hand, we take away the most effective mechanics for paper characters, and on the other, we add more immunity for tank characters. I don't see any sense in it at all, and it is true that the effect of progressive shortening of the duration is not very noticeable so far, but it opens the way for further nerfs in the future.
Wizard skills. Frostfield, cooldown reduced from 16 to 14 seconds. Ice Crystal, cooldown reduced from 30 to 25 seconds. Disintegrate, damage increased by 20%. Ray of Frost, damage increased by 20%.
And here I was hoping that the additional 20% damage would apply to all versions of these skills, but unfortunately this only applies to the basic version. If an essence changes the mechanics of a skill, the 20% is no longer present, unless it is described below in a specific essence.
Frostreaver's Garments, cooldown reduced from 30 to 25 seconds. Ephemeral Visage, increased resolution, speed of continual damage and persistent ground damage effect. S reduced from 80% to 60%.
And here slow time got a nerf, something that a lot of wizards used in the previous season. Not sure if 20% is that much though.
Searing Judgment, beam damage increased by 20%. Burn damage increased by 20%. Pads of Protection, damage increased by 20%. Robes of the Avalanche, damage increased by 25%. Fanciful Finesse, damage increased by 33%. The Enervators, immune to knockback effects while shielded.
And here the last item that gives immunity to knockback effects works really surprisingly well. Along with Ray of Frost, it really makes the wizard game much more stable, and I base my PvP on it.
Necromancer skills, Bone Spirits, damage increased by 25%.
And again, this only applies to the basic version, the channeled one, so the big skulls remain unchanged.
Necromancer items. Soul Levy, cooldown reduced from 12 to 9 seconds. Priest's Grub Knife, damage increased by 17%. Accounting for weakness, Golem attack damage increased by 25%. Golem leap damage increased significantly, roughly 580%.
It is worth noting here that practically the active skill of each golem should be buffed, not just skeletal one, but it would be cool to test how hard it hits now.
Draft Cryptic, cooldown reduced from 12 to 10 seconds. Strange Sojourn, cooldown increased from 6 to 7.5 seconds.
Another game changer. We can already see that many necromancers have returned to the old wrath form.
Grave Cutter, slice damage increased by 20%. Bleed damage increased by 20%. Abnegation, cooldown until same player can be affected by knockback increased from 3 to 5 seconds. Shudderstrike, enemies damaged and affected by immobilize from bone spikes are now unable to use dash skills. Demon Hunter skills, Multishot, damage increased by 20%. Sentry, cooldown reduced from 18 to 12 seconds, damage increased by 39%. Demon Hunter items. Murder Most, no longer causes you to lose life. Critical hit chance bonus reduced from 12% to 10%. Ruinous Path, added a bonus to evasion rating. That increases with Essence Mastery. Tarblack Rain, cooldown reduced from 12 to 10 seconds. Improved animation speed, added a short retreat upon cast. Concentrated Coldness, instead of being chilled. Enemies struck are now frozen for 2 seconds.
And this is probably the best change for Demon Hunter. Smoke Screen is now a great opener with a total loss of control. If I was Demon Hunter, then I would take a closer look to this essence for sure.
Breath of Winter, damage increased by 20%. Flamespite, shot damage increased by 20%. Burn damage increased by 20%. Pinpoint Overflow, damage increased by 56%. Tiresome Rebuke, damage increased by 20%. Isils Contained Destruction, cooldown reduced from 18 to 12 seconds. Damage increased by 27%. Frozen Guardian's Sight, cooldown reduced from 18 to 12 seconds. Damage increased by 48%. Artillery Master's Battle Helm, cooldown reduced from 18 to 12 seconds. Damage increased by 27%. One Zone Fusillade, Essence Mastery upgrades no longer increase duration, instead increasing the damage bonus per mastery level 8%, 10.4%, 12.8%, 15.2% respectively. Bore at the door, cooldown reduced from 12 to 9 seconds. Damage increased by 17%. Blood Knight skills. Transfusion, shield amount increased by 16%. Spear Flurry, damage increased by 25%. Blood Knight items, Overrun, damage increased by 25%. Bardish of Below, damage increased by 20%. Pinch Point, players can now only be knocked airborne. Once every 3 seconds, Peer of the Cursed, cooldown reduced from 15 to 12 seconds.
And I'm very surprised that the Blood Knight still survives all the nerfs. His items can practically be used interchangeably, which if you don't have heavy CC usually ends with you being unable to do anything to him.
Barbarian skill. Hammer of the Ancients, optimize the cast animation speed of this skill. Cleave, cooldown reduced from 9 to 6 seconds. Furious Charge, damage increased by 22%. Grab, cooldown reduced from 9 to 7 seconds. Added 2 seconds stun to thrown enemy, greatly reduced initial grab animation. Barbarian items, Axe of the Ray, damage increased by 25%. Cooldown reduced from 9 to 6 seconds. Lurker's Last Chance, channeled damage increased by 29%. Bleed damage increased by 25%. Screaming Fury, damage increased by 15%. Tracker's Rage, Essence Mastery bonus now increases damage by 10%, 13%, 16%, 19%. Determination, damage increased by 15%. Collision width expanded to match Furious Charge. Rooms in Pass, charge distance increased from 5.5 to 7.5 meters, added a 2-second stun. The Hewer, immune to loss of control, and knockback effects during the skill, improved turning ability. Greatly reduced the sliding that occurred after the slam. Dash damage increased by 180%. Smash damage increased by 38%. Smith's Reach, cooldown reduced from 9 to 6 seconds. Monk skills. Inner Sanctuary, in Battleground and Rite of Exile, cooldown is increased from 20 to 24 seconds. Mystic Allies, cooldown reduced from 30 to 25 seconds. Shield of Zen, shield amount increased by 15%. Monk items. Soptef Lamplighter, cooldown reduced from 30 to 25. Intervening Law, shield amount to self increased by 15%. Shield amount to allies increased by 150%. Tempest's Heart, while executing Cyclone Strike, you are now immune to loss of control and knockback effects. Blazing Ablution, added a bell in the middle at the position of the caster. Damage increased by 50%. Shoulders of Villains, damage increased by 25%. Noble's Path, fixed no damage on secondary attacks increased by 43%. Cooldown reduced from 12 to 10 seconds. Endless Trial, damage increased by 37%. Power of Undulation, damage increased by 25%.
And finally, my future class, Crusader.
Faith Ascendant, Essence Mastery bonus now increases damage by 10%. 13%, 16%, 19%. Little Lance, cooldown reduced from 15 to 12 seconds. Air Splitter, damage increased by 20%. Errant Ignition, duration increased from 6 to 10 seconds. Burn damage increased by 50%. Bygone Eidolon, time between skill activations reduced from 1.5 to 0.75 seconds. Bonebearer, Heaven Squints, Karawan's Catch, damage increased by 25%.
And that's it. Let me know what to think about these changes. And as always, thanks for watching.